Good afternoon. National Assembly of Wales is now in session, and the first item this afternoon questions the First Minister. And question 1 is Bethan Jenkins.
Will the First Minister provide an update on the Welsh Government's report into restoring open cast sites in Wales?
Yes, we'll take forward a number of recommendations from the report, and we will undertake a focused review of MTAN 2, and I know the Minister will host a summit of key stakeholders in July.
First Minister, your government received the report some 14 months ago, and yet we have nothing from your colleagues yet except vague assurances that this research is being considered. Meanwhile, in Cwm Llanfell and in the Rhymney Valley, they are waiting to see whether you will call in East Pitt and Nanllesg respectively. Will you now implement the findings of the report that I mentioned and also consider some of the ideas that myself and other colleagues in this chamber have proposed to you with regards to open cast mining?
Well, it would be incorrect to say that nothing has been done in the meantime, because the research was commissioned to provide an all-Wales picture of the situation. As a result of that research, a review is taking place of MTAN 2, working with the Coal Authority and, of course, with key stakeholders. A meeting will be held on the 8th of July to that effect. I can also say that the Minister has written to the Secretary of State for Energy and Climate Change to seek urgent discussions on the UK Government's responsibilities with regard to restoration liabilities. And I know that the Minister is due to meet the Minister of State at DEC to discuss those matters.
David Rees.
First Minister, as you know, Park Slip presents both a blight on our environment and a danger to our communities, particularly since it stopped working. Restoration is demanded now by local residents, and Celtic Energy must act now. What discussions will the Welsh Government have with the local authorities and Celtic Energy following East Pitt being allowed to actually continue operations and allegedly having funding allocated to that, to ensure that funding is actually put into place to deliver restoration at this site? Well,
the difficulty, as you will know with Park Slip, is there's a financial black hole in terms of the restoration. As a result of the way that coal was privatised some years ago, it was not possible to put in place an appropriate amount of money to pay for full restoration, and that's the difficulty. Bearing that in mind, that's why the Minister, of course, is having a meeting with the UK Government Minister in order that the wrongs that were created at that time are righted now by the UK Government.
Mohammed Ashgar.
Presiding officer. First Minister, earlier this year, you indicated that clean-up costs associated with open cast sites added weight to calls for a moratorium on open cast mining in Wales. Is your word. Will the First Minister update the Assembly on any plan the Welsh Government may have in this regard, please?
Well, the problem is not to do with current workings necessarily. It's to do with workings that are already taking place. There are severe problems in terms of finding the money for restoration at open cast sites that have been worked for many, many years. The reason why there is a financial deficit in that regard is because the way coal was privatised. That is a decision that was taken by the UK Government. We take the view that the UK Government have a responsibility to make sure that restoration at these sites takes place.
Peter Black.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Minister, I'm pleased that the Government has now finally approached the UK Government in terms of their responsibilities in restoring these open cast sites. But you will be aware, of course, that some of the permissions relating to open cast, where there isn't funds for restoration, have taken place within the lifetime of this Assembly. I think East Pitt had an extension within the lifetime of this Assembly as an example of that. Can I ask you what evidence the Welsh Government is gathering together to make the strongest possible case to the UK Government in terms of the intervention on their part and putting forward funds to carry out these restorations which the communities living near these open cast sites demand and should expect as a result of previous conditions?
Well, we know that the money does not seem to exist at the moment to restore those sites, but the UK Government can provide that money. I don't see why the Welsh Government should look to provide money for mistakes that were committed in Whitehall. In the same way, local authorities can't be reasonably expected to provide that kind of money either. I think it's fair to say. The responsibility rests on the operators of the sites, whoever they may be at any given moment in time. We know the history of at least 2 sites in terms of a transfer of ownership to a company that exists that is registered in the British Virgin Islands, or 2 companies registered in that way. And it's absolutely crucial that the operators understand their liabilities, but also for the UK Government to understand that the difficulty here lies in the way in which coal was privatised, and so there is a moral responsibility on the UK Government to make good on what was done then.
Gwenda Thomas.
Diolch Llywydd. First Minister, I'm encouraged by your responses this afternoon. And I was glad to hear the Minister for Natural Resources commit to convene an open cast summit to develop a Welsh approach to the problems of restoration. Key to making this work will be getting the right stakeholders to attend. Following recent events in my constituency, I would like to ask you, First Minister, will you make sure that communities local to open gas will be represented at this summit?
Absolutely, that is the intention. I know that officials will be sending invitations to relevant AMs, of course, to community representatives, to site operators and local authority officers and members, and I understand those invitations will go out towards the end of this week.
Question 2, David Ellis-Thomas.
Thank you, Dame Presiding Officer. What issues did the First Minister and the Scottish First Minister discuss at their latest meeting?
A number of issues of common interest to both sides, including, of course, the United Kingdom government policies which impact on devolved responsibilities.
I thank the First Minister for his response. As you would expect, it was a great pleasure for me to read the joint statement by both of you as First Ministers, but may I ask you how you intend to ensure that Scotland and Wales aren't forced to exit the European Union against the wishes of their people, and that the firm foundation for both nations' constitutions provided by the Human Rights Act is safeguarded?
Well,
I don't think the UK could remain if there were a vote to leave the EU and that Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland had voted to stay within. I think there would be a constitutional crisis if that were to be the case. In terms of the Human Rights Act, both of us agreed that what the UK government wanted to do changes the constitutions of both Scotland and Wales, and that shouldn't be done without the consent of the Scottish Parliament and, of course, the Parliament of Wales.
Rathbone.
I wondered, given that Nicola Sturgeon isn't particularly interested in retaining the unification of the UK, I wondered what discussions you may have had with her, or indeed with other parties, on how to promote regional devolution in England to ensure that the devolution of Scotland and Wales isn't considered something that people in England resent, and enabling us to have proper democratic control in other parts of the UK, not just in Wales.
I can't say it formed part of our discussions, but the member will know that I've said on several occasions that the trickiest issue to resolve in terms of devolution is England. What do you do with England because of its size? How should devolution roll forward there? But above all else, it's important there's a holistic approach to devolution across the whole of the UK rather than the piecemeal approach we see at the moment.
Nick Ramsey.
First Minister, did you discuss the issue of tax devolution with the Scottish First Minister during your meeting? As we're all aware, in the run-up to 2018, a raft of taxes, including stamp duty, landfill tax, will be devolved to the Welsh Government, but we still don't have any detailed costings from your government about how much the collection of some of those taxes are going to cost, an issue I raised with the Finance Minister last week. It seems to me Scotland is ahead of the game in this area in terms of having a tax collection ability from its inception. I wonder whether you could learn from some of their experience north of the border.
Of course, I mean, it's fair to say, of course, the powers were devolved earlier in Scotland as well. And we have been working very closely with the Scottish Government to learn from their experience of how to work with HMRC particularly. But it is right to say that in the discussions I had with the First Minister of Scotland, that there are huge complications in terms of the powers that are proposed to be devolved to Scotland and how they will work vis-à-vis the Barnett formula. The Treasury take one view, the Scottish Government take another.
Julie Morgan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Did the First Minister have any opportunity to discuss with the First Minister of Scotland the effect of having 16 and 17-year-olds to vote in the Scottish referendum? And when does he anticipate that we will have 16 and 17-year-olds voting here in any referendums or in elections?
We didn't discuss the issue specifically. Of course, at the moment, we have no such power. Those powers will come to us as an Assembly. We don't know how soon that will happen because these matters are entirely within the hands of the UK government. But speaking personally, I can say that 16 and 17-year-olds having voted in the Scottish referendum, it is difficult to argue then that they should not be allowed to vote in other referenda or indeed more generally in the future.
We now move to questions from the party leaders, and first this afternoon, the Leader of Plaid Cymru, Leanne Wood.
Diolch, Llywydd. First Minister, many people are of the view that in order to access rare drugs or treatments, that they have to move to England or to other parts of Wales. Are you confident that people with rare diseases or rare cancers are able to access the treatment that they need regardless of where they live?
Yes, I mean, we have a system, of course, as the Leader of Plaid Cymru will know, where when new drugs appear, they go through an approval process via NICE. On occasions where drugs are not approved, there is then, of course, the IPFR process in Wales, where people can make individual funding requests to have drugs funded for their particular needs.
The First Minister will know that the existing system is not working. We do have a problem here, yet you do seem to be in denial about that problem. Now, I know that you were aware of the case of Vaughan Williams and the Howl eView campaign, and I know as well that they've been trying to secure a meeting with you. There's also been another high-profile case over the weekend involving the former Chief Executive of Betsy Cadwaladr. My concern also extends to those people, of course, who are not in a position to relocate either to England or to other parts of Wales for treatment that they think that they need. Now, the perception is that the Welsh system is not fair, that people in Wales are losing out. How can you reassure those patients in Wales, and what is your message to those people like Vaughan Williams and his family who are not able to receive the treatments that they believe that they need?
I think it's important that treatments are not offered by politicians. It's a decision for doctors. And the IPFR process that we have, of course, is a process where doctors are involved in determining whether drugs are appropriate. It's right to say, of course, that England has a different system in terms of cancer drugs, but we also know with the Cancer Drugs Fund that fewer and fewer drugs are now available through that fund. It's an exceptionally emotive issue. I'm aware, of course, of Mr Williams' position. It's very difficult for him and, of course, for his family. What I can say is that when it comes to cancer treatment in Wales, approved drugs are rolled out more quickly than they are in England. We know that greater restrictions are being placed on some of the least effective drugs in the Cancer Drugs Fund in England. And indeed, in terms of treatment times in Wales, we are regularly ahead of England. It's very difficult to accommodate individual cases because they're very difficult, of course, for the individuals involved and for the families involved. But in terms of access to treatment, we believe that access is fair and equitable.
Well, many people, First Minister, do not believe the situation is fair and equitable at all. Now, a Plaid Cymru government would establish a new medicines and treatments fund that would end the postcode lottery. It would end the postcode lottery of unfair treatments, and it would expand the number of treatments that are available to patients in Wales. Now, I'm not clear from your answer, First Minister, whether or not you accept that there's a problem, or whether or not you're prepared to hear from Vaughan Williams and the campaigners, or whether or not that you have a solution to this problem at all. So I'll ask you again, do you accept that there is a problem with patients in Wales being treated unfairly? And if you do accept that there is a problem, can you please tell us what you're going to do about it?
Well, first of all, I think that cancer treatment in Wales is widely available for people. There are some individuals, Mr Williams is one, who are going through a particularly difficult time. I think that's something that we all appreciate. One thing I have to say, of course, that in the main, for most people, the drugs that are available for the Cancer Drugs Fund in England are not life-saving drugs for most people. They are drugs that sometimes extend life by a few weeks, a few months. It's difficult to tell with individuals, but of course, it's natural for people to grasp an opportunity if it's there. There is a wider issue here, though, and that is, if we are to have a system that ignores NICE and ignores an approvals process, then what's the point of having an approvals process in the first place? And secondly, one of the problems with the Cancer Drugs Fund is that it pays drugs companies whatever they ask for the drugs. There is no pressure on them to reduce the cost of drugs. And in the NICE system, there is. What happens in NICE is they will come back with a reduced price, and then, of course, there is a cost saving as far as the NHS is concerned. The difficulty with having a system where there is no pressure on those drugs companies is they can charge whatever they want, knowing that they'll get paid whatever they want. And that financial discipline isn't there. And, of course, it's important to make sure that we have drugs that are effective. Pharmaceutical companies will make lots of claims about the drugs that they bring onto the market. They invest a lot of money into those drugs. There has to be a process to examine those claims and to see whether the drug is going to be effective for most people in the future. Where, of course, an individual may be able to benefit from a drug that's not approved, then the IPFR process is there. Although, of course, as you will know, the Minister has been looking at how that process might be improved in Wales.
We now move to Leader of the Opposition, Andrew Archie-Davis.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Mary Burrows made some very valid points and very emotional points over the weekend in her press statements, First Minister. She is an individual who has been through a lot of pain, a lot of grief. Her own husband passed away through a terminal diagnosis of cancer, obviously, and she's got her own battle on at the moment. She is also uniquely placed as a former administrator, senior administrator, in the largest health board in Wales. I'd welcome your comments and your thoughts on what she said about a cancer drugs fund and access to cancer drugs here in Wales.
It's very difficult to comment because I don't know the full details. I don't know, for example, whether an application was made through the existing system for funding. It's not something I'm aware of. Without knowing the full facts, it's very difficult to comment, but of course for her it's a difficult situation, as it is for anybody who's fighting cancer.
Her comments allude to the fact that her own consultant said that she would not be able to access the drugs that she would require. And you just said in response to the opening remarks from the Leader of Plaid Cymru that politicians shouldn't prescribe drugs, clinicians should prescribe drugs. And in this instance, Mary Burrows was very clear that her clinicians advised her to seek an address in England so she could access the drugs that would prolong her life. Sadly, her diagnosis is terminal, but she could get some drugs that could give her valuable time. Now, you have said quite clearly today that politicians shouldn't prescribe the drugs, clinicians should. Well, she has identified that clinicians in her case were telling her that the drugs would benefit her, but politicians do create the policy. And in this case, your government has created the policy that is preventing people accessing these drugs. Will you, in the light of her remarks and many other people's remarks, both clinicians and patients and family members, review the advice and the policy that you issue in this particular field?
I think there are 2 points here. What is not clear is whether her own clinicians made the application for funding. It's not clear. If they did not, then they need to explain why not. And I don't know whether that's the case or not. It simply isn't correct for any clinician to say this drug is not available in Wales under any circumstances. You're receiving advice, I see, from somebody. In any circumstances, well, that wouldn't be right, because, of course, we have a system that enables people to apply for funding. And as part of that system, it is clinicians who take the decision. The people who take the decisions are not bureaucrats. They are not politicians. They are clinicians themselves.
First Minister, I don't need to take advice, although Darren Mill has been at the forefront of fighting for this campaign along with me to get a cancer drugs fund here in Wales, and I welcome the belated support for such a fund here in Wales. It's regrettable that you, as the government, have chosen not to adjust your policy to meet the circumstances that many people face. Mary Burrows was quite clear that the advice that her consultants, and I would refer you to her comments, because if you had read them, they are there for all to read, that her consultants said that her application via the funding mechanism that we have here in Wales would fail. He said it would fail. That was the advice that her consultant gave her. Now, she is acting on the best advice available to her with a diagnosis as terminal that ultimately she hasn't got the time to hang around, as many other patients haven't got the time to hang around, such as Ivan Williams as well, who has also sought this route to the other side of Offers Dyke. Again, I do implore you to look at the advice and the policy that your government has taken, as I've been imploring you since I've taken up the leadership of the Conservative group. In the absence of you reviewing that policy and that advice, and that is a discussion that we'll continue to have, the other bit of advice that Mary Burrows brought forward was that on a UK basis, there does need to be a discussion held between the governments and administrations across the UK how we develop better access to all new treatments. And I'd be interested to hear, if you're not prepared to review your policy on cancer drugs, how you would take forward that discussion nationally with England, Scotland and Northern Ireland so that these new treatments can become more widely available across the whole of the United Kingdom and we end the postcode lottery.
Well, we have an individual treatments fund, of course, that has been put in place for some years now. In terms of the cancer drugs fund, I don't know clearly what the consultant said to Mary Burrows. But if the consultant said that there was not even any point applying for funding, then that is not the right advice. Now, I don't know whether that was what was said or not. We don't know the full detail of it. But if the consultant said that, then the consultant should explain why. Because I do not know of any other consultant who wouldn't even try to get funding in the first place. But these are matters between patient and doctor, but that's what the Leader of the Opposition has said has happened. I'm not clear why that advice was given. He makes a point in terms of how we assess new treatments and drugs as they appear on the market. As I said, pharmaceutical companies will make claims about drugs. It's natural they should do that. They invest a lot of money in drugs. The reality is that for most people, most drugs are exceptionally incremental in terms of the treatment that they offer. There are very few drugs that appear that change lives or that cure people. It is right to say that for some people, and no two individuals are the same with cancer, we know that, some drugs will prolong life for longer than others. And for some people, that's worthwhile. Of course it is. I understand that. But we come back to the point, if we have a system, an independent system of approvals for drugs, then we either don't have that system, or we have a system that also has the ability for an application for funding outside of that system. That's what the IPFR does. Clinicians take the decision, as I say, not politicians or bureaucrats. But it is important to understand, of course, that there is an objective view as far as that individual is concerned and as far as the drug is concerned. The difficulty with the Cancer Drugs Fund in England is, of course, we know it's been cut back. We know that in March a decision was taken to remove a number of drugs from that fund for particular conditions because they were seen as ineffective. The chair of the Cancer Drugs Fund in England has also expressed concerns that the drugs being made available are not particularly effective. Now, these are very difficult matters, particularly for individuals who themselves have cancer, and it's exceptionally emotive for them and their families. I understand that. But we have to have a system in place where drugs can be properly evaluated, and yes, where it's possible for people to get that extra funding for drugs where it's felt that it's appropriate for them. I do not know in this case whether such an application was made.
We now move to Leader of the Welsh Liberal Democrats, Kirsty Williams.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, today your Health Minister is outlining his plans to ban e-cigarettes in enclosed public spaces in Wales. Ash Wales have said, and I quote, "We should be very wary of taking steps that could undermine those who are using them as a means of protecting themselves from the harms attributable to tobacco." Could you explain to me, First Minister, how it helps somebody who was using an e-cigarette as a means of quitting conventional tobacco to be forced to stand outside with cigarette smokers?
Can I congratulate the Leader of the Liberal Democrats for her award from Save E-Cigs for the work that she's done in this field, which I know she's received. But the point is this. The debate has crystallised this morning around the suggestion that e-cigarettes will be banned completely. They're not. They'll just be treated in the same way as conventional cigarettes, where people would not be able to use them in public places. The World Health Organization has advised that this should be done, so it's not based on no evidence or flimsy evidence. And of course, there are some countries that have banned the use of e-cigarettes in public places, and some countries, Malaysia and Brazil, for example, that have banned them completely. So there is evidence from the World Health Organization that suggests that taking such a move would be beneficial.
Thank you, First Minister. The Health Minister has said in an interview with the Western Mail today that there is a huge amount of evidence that e-cigarettes are renormalising smoking for people. However, in their submission to the consultation on your bill, respected Welsh cancer charity Tenefus said, current available evidence doesn't suggest that e-cigarettes are being experimented with by children or non-smokers. But it's not just Tenefus who are against your proposals. Cancer Research UK, the Royal College of Physicians and the British Heart Foundation all think that your government's approach is wrong. What do you know, First Minister, that these leading charities do not?
What does the World Health Organization know? Because they have said that this is something that should be done to bring these devices into line with conventional cigarettes. So again, I come back to the point, it's not the case that this is a whim or something that has no evidence. The evidence is there as far as the World Health Organization is concerned in countries such as Spain, that have restricted the use of e-cigarettes, and other countries that have banned them. Now, the reality is that there will be a temptation for some, particularly children, because I understand it is still legal to sell these devices to children as long as they don't contain nicotine. Where does that lead as far as children is concerned? And it's important to make sure, well, I hear from the plaid benches that supportive of the Liberal Democrats on this particular issue, but where does it lead? I think that's an important position as well. Is it the case, for example, that tobacco companies... Is it the case that tobacco companies... Simon Thomas asked for evidence. He can see it from the World Health Organization if he cares to read what they have said. But secondly, is it the case then that tobacco companies are buying up e-cigarette companies? Why would they do that if they felt there was an opportunity to move people on to conventional cigarettes eventually?
First Minister, I've got no problem at all in restricting the sale of these devices to those under the age of 18. In fact, I've got no problem at all with regulating what goes into these devices so that those people purchasing them know what they're getting. But if you're interested in evidence, let me quote the British Heart Foundation to you. The law to prohibit smoking in enclosed public spaces was implemented to reduce the public health impact of second-hand smoke and was founded on strong evidence. There is little evidence that electronic cigarette vapour causes harm to non-users exposed to it. And First Minister, you quoted the example of Spain. Let me tell you what happened in Spain, and indeed in New York, where they also introduced such a ban. The reality was, in New York and Spain, since that ban, smoking rates actually rose. First Minister, why would you jeopardise the passing of your public health legislation, which has much in it to be recommended and to be supported, by including these proposals that are based on so little evidence?
She is earning her award, isn't she, this afternoon? But the point that I make to her once again is that it simply isn't correct to say that the evidence is not there to support such a ban. It's there from the World Health Organization. We know that these devices can be harmful to individuals. We know that there is need for more research, true, because there's much more research with regard to conventional cigarettes. And of course, we need to ensure that we don't see these devices being seen as leading to the normalization of nicotine use again in the future. So the evidence is there. Yes, the evidence is not wholly agreed on by some organizations. I accept what she has said, but nevertheless it is there as far as many large organizations, particularly the World Health Organization, are concerned.
We now move back to questions on the paper, and question 3 is Paul Davis.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Will the First Minister make a statement on what the Welsh Government is doing to improve the economy of Pembrokeshire?
Well, we are committed, of course, to supporting economic growth through interventions such as support for new and existing businesses, infrastructure improvements, reviewing business rates policy and promoting Wales as a tourism destination.
Well, of course, one way of supporting the local economy is to ensure that there is appropriate transport infrastructure in place, and you will be aware that I am still arguing the case that dualling the A40 in Pembrokeshire would be a huge assistance to the local economy. Now, I'm sure you're aware that the closing date for your own government's study into the possibility of turning the A40 into dual carriageway has now passed. In light of this, can you tell us, First Minister, when the Welsh Government will publish the outcome of this work?
Well, this week there will be a ministerial statement.
George Watson.
Diolch, Llywyd. First Minister, yesterday I went to see the groundbreaking solar hamlet project in North Pembrokeshire, and I know that you yourself have visited it, and I also know that the Welsh Government has supported the nearby eco factory with significant investment. And the project does use production is of local products and high quality training opportunities and high quality jobs. Will you look to build on projects like the T-Solar model to further enhance the green economy in West Wales?
Yes, absolutely. We know that there are enormous opportunities for marine energy, particularly off our coast, and I was very pleased to see the announcement last week of the creation of 100 new jobs on the Haven Waterway Enterprise Zone by Mainport Engineering. It shows that the Haven Enterprise Zone is moving in the right direction in terms of being able to attract jobs.
Simon Thomas.
Diolch, Llywyd.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, in a period of cuts in public expenditure, any steps that enables private businesses to invest to improve the economy is something that's worth considering, in my view, and it has been estimated that cutting VAT in tourism from 20% to 5% would bring £7.6 million to Carmarthen, West and South Pembrokeshire, and 4.5 million to Preseli Penfro. Now, in the past, in the budget, you've supported my calls for a cut in VAT for tourism businesses. There is a budget in the pipeline, an emergency budget from George Osborne. Would you welcome such a cut in VAT for tourism?
Well, of course, VAT is a tax that can only be changed across the whole of the UK. Having said that, that would be a great boon to tourism, not just in Wales but across the UK, and we would support it.
William Powell.
Diolch, Llywydd. First Minister, as you'll be aware, over the years there have been numerous calls for the tolls on the Cleddau Bridge to be scrapped. Not only do they constitute an unfair tax on local residents, businesses and regular bridge users, but they also seem to fly in the face of Welsh Government priorities for economic development as manifested in the Haven Waterways Enterprise Zone. Whilst Pembrokeshire County Council awaits a response from the Wales Audit Office in terms of some concerns around the bridge accounts, which I believe are causing some anxiety, does the First Minister agree with me that it's high time that the Welsh Government took an initiative to actually bring this matter to the fore so that those tolls can be phased out for the betterment of the Pembrokeshire economy?
Well, I mean, those accounts need to be accepted, of course, and ratified, but work would have to be done to assess the maintenance costs on the bridge itself and to see whether those costs could be met if the tolls were removed. The tolls are not particularly high, as we know, but I understand if people use the bridge regularly, of course, the cost will mount up. We have to take a decision based on what the liabilities would then be if the tolls were removed, balancing that, of course, against the income that the tolls themselves produce.
Question 4, Janet Finch-Saunders.
Diolch, Llywydd. Will the First Minister make a statement on Welsh Government action to support home ownership in Wales?
Well, we've put in place a number of initiatives to support home ownership, including Help to Buy Wales and Home Buy, and housing associations are also providing a range of low-cost home ownership support.
Thank you, First Minister. As of June 2013, and according to figures sourced by the Welsh Conservatives, there were 32,403 empty properties throughout Wales. And despite your target to bring 5,000 back, ready for the social rented market, by 2016, there are thousands of properties that could be brought back as suitable properties for home ownership. With 84% of adults in Wales aspiring to own their own home within 10 years, what steps are you taking to ensure that local authorities are rising to this challenge, and how confident are you that the 5,000 target will even be met by this time next year?
We are confident. We know that local authorities have taken advantage of a scheme to refurbish properties that have been out of use for some time. I've seen them with my own eyes. I saw it, for example, in Bury Port some months ago, where Carmarthenshire Council had done just that, and somebody was living in that house. We know, of course, that the house building market is more robust than it was, and there is a need, an unmet need for more private housing, and people will want to buy their own homes, and that is something, of course, that they are being encouraged to do through through Help to Buy Wales. What we won't do, of course, is to sell off our social housing stock, therefore creating more homelessness. What is proposed in England, and Sir Lord Kerslake, he said this, of course, quite clearly, is that you sell off your social housing, which apparently, if you sell off one house, it generates enough income to build another 3. Well, I don't know how that kind of voodoo economics works, but that is nevertheless what is proposed. And it's the equivalent of trying to solve a problem with a housing shortage by trying to fill up a bath with the plug out. And that is not something that not a trap we will fall into in Wales.
Mick Anthony.
First Minister, do you agree with Lord Kerslake, the former head of the Civil Service, who describes the UK government's plan to sell off housing association stock as wrong in principle and wrong in practice? And do you agree with me that whilst we want to see more people owning their own homes, investing in and retaining social housing is an important part of providing affordable housing?
Well, that's quite right. There is a need for more private homes, and the house builders are meeting that need. We see, of course, developments, I'm sure, around Wales where that is happening. But you do not look to address that need by simply removing houses in the private rented sector and putting them into the private sector. That simply means that fewer and fewer people can access public housing, and more people end up without a home. And what is important is that we do see, and we welcome the increase in construction over the past few years, but we also see an increase in the provision of social housing. Otherwise, we will continue to have a situation which many of us, I'm sure, have in this chamber, where we have young families and individuals who want access to social housing. Selling off that social housing is not a way to meet their needs.
Roger Lynn Thomas.
First Minister, may I warmly welcome what you're doing in terms of ensuring that quality housing is available for all, and discriminating between homeowners and people who rent their homes can create a situation whereby people who pay rent see themselves as second-class citizens, and it's important that we ensure that there is quality housing available for all, and those of us who have purchased homes have done so for the most part with the support of the banks, and there isn't much difference between paying a mortgage and paying rent. But the important thing is that everyone in Wales should have access to quality housing, and that we don't actually ignore the rental sector in order to encourage people to buy their own homes.
Well, that's right, but one of the things that has changed, of course, is that social housing, that houses for rent are of the same quality as the private homes. In the past, if any council house estate were given an award in the 60s, it would mean that it wasn't falling apart, and that was something that was to be welcomed. So we want to ensure that there isn't any distinction between private sector and public sector houses. Despite the fact that very many people find it very difficult to get a mortgage, we should ensure that there is choice out there, that they can rent homes, and that selling off that stock of housing would undermine those needs.
Thank you. Will the First Minister outline the Welsh Government's approach to tackling the effects of alcohol misuse in the Cynon Valley?
Yes, the Substance Misuse Delivery Plan 2013 to 15 sets out the actions we're taking to tackle alcohol misuse in Wales, and I know that the Cwm Taf Area Planning Board commissioning strategy sets out specific actions being taken in the Cynon Valley.
Thank you, First Minister. We know that we face specific challenges in tackling alcohol abuse in many parts of Wales, with, for example, Public Health Observatory Wales data suggesting that per 100,000 deaths, 62.2 are partly linked to alcohol in Rhondda Cynon Taf, as opposed to a Welsh average of 50.9 deaths. Now, in this context, what consideration has the Welsh Government given to the findings of the OECD's Tackling Harmful Alcohol Abuse report, which shows an overall increase in alcohol consumption in the UK, and to the report's recommendations?
It is something that we've taken great note of. Of course, one way to regulate and reduce alcohol consumption is through minimum pricing. And we wait to see, of course, what the outcome of the Scottish case in the European Court will be, in order to understand what restrictions may or may not be placed on that issue in the future. But as the Minister has previously stated, he's certainly keen to move forward with doing that. I think it's worth pointing out that in terms of Cwm Taf, they are performing consistently well against the key performance indicators. The information we have shows that 94.6% of clients access treatment within 20 days of being referred, and only 17.1% didn't attend appointments in March of 2015. So that's a very good rate in terms of enabling people to have access to that to the treatment they need, and of course making sure they turn up for it.
Andrew Archie Davis.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, Cynon Valley isn't in isolation. Obviously, alcohol in some quarters is a very sociable and convivial coming together of people to have a drink, but in other quarters is very damaging, destructive, and rips families apart. What is critical is that education and the field in education actually informs young people of the dangers of alcohol, and in particular the corrosive nature that alcohol can have within the family environment. How confident are you that the public health messaging that the Welsh Government works with local education authorities to deliver in schools and in young people's environments, such as the Young Farmers Organisations and other youth organisations, is having that effect about changing young people's view on the responsibilities around alcohol consumption?
It's of course a fair point to raise, but one thing I think we have to say is that there is evidence to suggest that young people are not so much the problem anymore. That young people's alcohol consumption is not as high as it once was. There has been research that suggests that it's those who are at the same age as he and I are who are more of an issue in terms of the threat to health. And he's right to say that alcohol, when enjoyed responsibly, it adds to conviviality, the word that he used. It's when it becomes a threat to life. But of course, there are major issues, and we know that for some people, an addiction develops that can never be conquered except through total abstinence. So it's not simply a question of working with youth organisations and schools, it's also making sure that the message goes out to all sections of society that there's no level. Safe drinking is not a message for one section of the population according to their age, but across the entire population. We hope to do that, of course, through the public health messaging that we have and through the bill, and ultimately, of course, through introducing legislation with regard to minimum pricing.
Question 6, Eleni Parrott.
George Llywydd. Will the First Minister provide an update on the Cardiff City region?
Yes, good progress is being made on creating a unity of purpose around the priorities of skills, connectivity, innovation and growth, and they will help to shape the future development of the region.
Thank you, First Minister. On Thursday, I understand the Secretary of State for Wales will be hosting a meeting of the leaders of 10 local authorities in South East Wales to see how they can put together a bid for a city deal. Now, clearly that's a fantastic opportunity to deliver a city region strategy for the Cardiff capital region. But in other successful city regions, that leadership has come from the grassroots. Here in Wales, much of the running has been made by the Welsh Government. So why is it now necessary for a Westminster politician to intervene to sort things out?
I don't think that's fair. I think Cardiff have been very much in the forefront of moving ahead with the city deal, in fairness to them, and they've worked very closely with other surrounding authorities as well. I have discussed briefly the issue of city deals with the Secretary of State. What we don't have is detail. We don't know how much money that's involved. We don't know what contributions will be sought from Welsh Government. We don't know what contributions might be sought from local government, although in principle, of course, we'd be supportive of the city deal. But we await more information. But I think it's only fair to point out that much of the running has been made by Cardiff. We've worked with them and indeed by other local authorities.
Jenny Rathbone.
I would agree with you, First Minister, that Cardiff has been at the forefront of leading on this and certainly been a bottom-up process. But because Cardiff is one of the fastest growing cities in the UK and 1/3 of the workforce actually commutes into the city, it's absolutely imperative that we have the transport system to accommodate that growth, because otherwise we'll have a completely unlivable city clogged up with cars and very poor air quality. So what steps are being taken to ensure that the Cardiff City region is getting to grips with the South Wales Metro and that it goes hand in hand with the development of and growth of the city?
Yes, there have been numerous discussions amongst ministers in terms of how we take this forward, and the Economy, Science and Transport Minister will update members further on progress and the next steps before the summer recess.
Graham.
First Minister, one of the major factors in attracting further economic development to the Cardiff City region is ensuring effective movement of traffic. We look forward to electrification, of course, of the railways. Are you aware that Department of Transport to indicate the number of motor vehicles using the M4 between junctions 26 and 25A has increased by 11% already? What action can you now take to improve access to the city region?
Well, there's no doubt that the Brynglas tunnels are a problem in terms of traffic. We know that problem is not going to go away. I know there are members in the Chamber who take different views as to how that should be resolved. The member will know our view as a government, which chimes, I think, with his view in reality, although he's not entirely in a position of consensus with the rest of his colleagues on that. The reality is that the traffic will continue to increase there. That doesn't mean, of course, that we, as it were, take our foot off the accelerator of moving ahead with the metro. But nevertheless, we cannot ignore the fact that there will be pinch points, not just along the M4, but the A55 as well. And we know, for example, the Newtown bypass, which is moving ahead now. It's long been needed in Powys, and something which we're moving forward with. So we shouldn't move into the trap of thinking that road improvements and sometimes quite major road schemes are in some way instead of schemes that promote the use of rail. The two things have to run together, and where we see road improvements, particularly on the A470, the Glandyvie Bends being, I mentioned them before, I know they're in Ceredigion, being one example of where safety has been improved. We can do that as well as, of course, promoting use of the railways.
Question 7, Rhys Iorwerth.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Will the First Minister make a statement on the success of the CCAMS development?
Well, it's an excellent example of how European Union funds are helping universities and businesses to exploit the great potential of Wales' wave and tidal resources to help Wales become a world leader in marine energy.
Thank you. Will the First Minister join with me in congratulating the CCAMS team and congratulating the excellent research that's been done over the past few years from the Bangor University Centre in Menai Bridge in my constituency, and it was wonderful to welcome the team here to Cardiff, where they held an exhibition last week. It's clear now that the investment has paid off in terms of promoting economic activity in broad areas, including the marine energy developments that are set to be so important in my constituency and other parts of Wales in future. Will the First Minister now express his support for the continuation of that work to ensure that CCAMS 2, if you like, can continue with the current work and seek new opportunities?
Well, CCAMS have worked with over 200 companies and they have already secured £8 million worth of investment into Wales already. I know that CCAMS and WEFO are working at present on a bid for further European funding through the programme up to 2020, and we also know that CCAMS is a WEFO priority, and we look forward, of course, to ensuring that this progresses according to the business plan.
First Minister, thank you for your earlier answer. Can you outline when the Welsh Government expects to publish a Welsh National Marine Plan, and also set out how the Welsh Government expects to be working with CCAMS to develop the strategy?
Well, we have been working with CCAMS already. We know there's great potential to the renewable energy sector in Wales. We have developed the Marine Renewable Energy Strategic Framework already, and we've been working closely with the Crown Estate in terms of the wave and tidal test and demonstration zones. We'll be continuing to work with Menter and Morn, for example, and Wave Hub as well. And it will make an enormous difference in terms of what we're able to do when we see the devolution of energy consenting powers up to 350 megawatts, both onshore and offshore.
Point of order, Kirsty Williams.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. I raise a point of order under 2.6 in the Standing Orders of the National Assembly that says, in the circumstances specified in Standing Order 2, before taking part in any Assembly proceedings, a member must make an oral declaration of any financial interest which he or may she have. In answer to my questions on e-cigarettes, the First Minister used the term she is earning her award this afternoon, with the inference that I may be being paid to ask questions in this chamber. To do so, Presiding Officer, would be a breach of standing orders, would be bringing this institution into disrepute. And I'm sure the First Minister's keen legal brain would also inform him that it was illegal for me to do so as well. Perhaps the First Minister would either bring forward evidence to the fact that I am in receipt of earnings in asking these questions, or perhaps he would like to clarify the choice of words that he used this afternoon.
Well, I don't make such an allegation. Perhaps I was a bit too harsh on the leader of the Liberal Democrats. The fact remains, in terms of the the answer I gave in answer to the first question, I make no suggestion that she is earning money as a result of her award, and I withdraw that.
Thank you. That's now on the record. Thank you very much. We now move on to item 2, which is the business.